Okay, so movement data. I mean, I've titled it Deepening Understanding of Places and Spaces because that's effectively, from my perspective, what we're trying to do. We're trying to help people know more about the use of place and space, and that can be in a range of different contexts and for a range of different applications. And as I go through the presentation today, I'll talk to a lot of those different applications and hopefully tie it to the kind of things that might be of use to organizations like yours. But I guess first of all, we need to broach the elephant in the room around what is movement data, because it's a concept, it's a phrase that you may or may not have heard, but what do we mean? Because it can mean different things to different people. And in the context of this conversation, we're talking about the use of GPS, which 5 points to anyone that knows what GPS stands for. You can unmute and tell me if anyone wants to venture a stab in the dark at
Global
what.
positioning satellite.
There you go. Well done, Amanda. Thank you. Maybe we'll keep the quiz going throughout the presentation. But yeah, so effectively, GPS is a signal from a mobile-enabled device which geolocates you. And by geolocate, we mean know where you are in relation to the rest of the world. So on mobile devices, like phones, for example, smartphones, whether you've got an Apple, whether you've got an Android, whatever type of phone you have, you generally, and 92% of the population in the UK have smartphones with mobile phone applications on it. So apps are things like Facebook or the Weather Channel, or when you order from Uber Eats or anything like that, if you're fortunate enough to have access to that in your parish or in your town. Those apps are connected to satellites to understand where you are, because a lot of the services and things that those apps provide need to know where you are in order to provide them. So, for example, if you want to know where the weather is, you open the weather app on your phone, it needs to know where you are to give you accurate weather. There's no point in telling you what the weather's like in Manchester if you're on the south coast, right? So GPS is used by lots of different apps on your phone. And we as a company buy that data, and we're tracking the use of the GPS that's generated by those apps from around 50,000 apps, and we're tracking around 20 million unique devices across the UK at all times. And what we do with that data is we're then able to locate any place of interest and understand the people who have been in and not in that space. And because of the sample size is so huge, we only have to do a small extrapolation to be able to provide accurate visitor estimates and understand how everybody uses and moves through different places and spaces. So effectively, I mean, there's a bit more detail here in terms of where the data itself comes from. You don't need to worry too much about it, but the vast majority of the data comes from mobile phone applications with 10 terabytes of data ingested and archived daily. So it's very difficult to put into words the size of the volume of data that we're working with. And we're working with such a large sample size, it gives us really good confidence that the outputs that we're able to produce are accurate. So with this data, and what I'm going to talk to you today is about our open space visitor service, basically, but we do other things. So if you are part of a larger town council, for example, who has an interest in active travel or transport and infrastructure planning, we also have a mobility data product which tracks the movement of all journeys in any geography. So cars, bikes, walking, public transport, we can identify the origin and destination location of all trips from your place or through your place, and also the distribution of those trips by different modes of transport. So if anybody wants to have a conversation about that, I'm sure my contact details will be shared, but I'm not going to talk about that too much today. We're going to focus on the place information. Importantly, wherever we have ground truth data, so some real-time or in-person count, whether that's from an in-place footfall counter or whether that's from surveying, we take that data in and we add that to the processing, because the learning model, the complex computing that goes on behind the scenes to produce the outputs, that ground truth data is really helpful in calibrating and making sure that that's as accurate as possible. So as I mentioned, this is, just some example of some of the apps and some of the data that we get, and it's not 100% accurate because it is modeled data, albeit based on such a large sample size. And we're processing this data all around the world. We work all around the world. And in fact, I think one or two of the examples I'm going to show you today come from different parts of the world, because I just wanted to highlight some specific features that might be of interest to you. And we are doing everything we can to make sure it's as accurate as possible at all times, to provide you with the confidence that the outputs that we're providing are useful. So there are two services effectively that I'm going to talk about. We have this tool called the activity trend, or the trend monitoring tool. That's an interactive platform, and I'll log into it and show you how it works shortly, that enables you to look at every square meter of the UK, but in 100-meter grid structures. So we have historic data that goes back to January 2021. So we have 3 years of data in the platform, and you can go back and look at hourly data every hour from then up to now. But the limitation of that high-level trend monitoring tool is that it's within the constraints of this 100-meter by 100-meter grid system. And you can't move the grid, so the grid is where the grid is. So if you've got a large open space that, maybe is multiple squares in this grid system, then it works really well. Or for example, if you have walking routes, trail networks that connect your parish or your villages or your towns to other places, or you're interested in the use of some of that connective infrastructure, then you can use it to monitor it in that way by building collections of these squares. And I'll show you how to do that shortly. And that enables you to compare the movement of people, the activity in that space over time. So place A, for example, a park. How has the usage of that space changed over time? Every month, every hour, going back to the start date. Or place A compared with place B. So you can bring the data in from 2 or more locations simultaneously to enable you to look at and compare site A with site B. So that can help with strategic infrastructure planning around investment into the development of a place or space, knowing how busy something is in compared to another place. And because you've got nationwide data, you can even go to lookalike parishes or other places anywhere in the country and do a comparison. So you might be able to find out why a particular, there's a particularly busy place or space in a neighboring parish or a neighboring town or even anywhere else in the country. The movement data will tell you that it's super busy, and you can then go and find out why it's busy and what you might be able to do to learn from that good practice in a different place. And we can see that through heat mapping. So the more red the map glows, the busier that particular space is. We can also pull that data through into dashboards and visualize graphs, and also download the raw data if any of you are super techie and into Power BI or Tableau or any of those analytics software. You can also set up automated notifications. So once you've built these collections of the places and spaces of interest to you, every month you can just receive the latest data, which will tell you the activity that month, and also how busy it is in compared to last month. So the percentage change and how busy it is in comparison to the same period in previous years. So you can build up these collections and then passively just receive the latest data every month around the use of that place or space. The second service is the detailed visitor reports. Now, this is a more complex output, so it's a little more expensive, but the data that you get is significantly more detailed. So this is where we're not using the grid system, we're not using the 100-meter squares. We're able to draw on a map virtually the perimeter of the place or space that we're interested in. That can be a high street, that can be a park, an open space, it can be a village hall, it can be a pavilion, it can be a trail network, it can be a path, it can be anything. So we draw that space on a map and create a shape. and it can be in a regular shape. The size doesn't matter. The shape doesn't matter. You can just create the shape based on what you want to know. So it all kind of starts with the exam question. What is it that you want to know? And then for those spaces, we can provide you with an annual report. So say for the last 12 months, or an ongoing subscription, or both, with detailed insights about who has been in that space. So we're able to tell you the number of people that have been in that space and how long the distribution of the dwell time. So how many people were there for less than 15 minutes, how many there for 30 minutes, how many were there for more than an hour, etc. We can also provide a report telling you about the origin location of where those visitors came from. So for that place or space, what's the distribution of people, and we can provide that as lower geographic level as output area level. I'm sure most of you are familiar with output areas in terms of geographical hierarchies and classification, but it's similar. If you're not, it's similar to a postcode level. And there are different things that we can do with that data that I'll kind of come on to throughout the slides. So just to kind of illustrate it and show you the difference between the two solutions. On the left, we've got the heat map of the 100-meter squares. This is an urban environment, so obviously it might look quite different in your parish, but you can see the heat map of the activity in those places at a particular time that we're looking at it. And in the mobile device, you can see an example of the monthly report. So for these different collections, whether it's kind of trending up or trending down in terms of activity during that period. And on the right, you can see the more detailed report in which you get a range of outputs, including the daily visit counts by things like different days of the week, and a more detailed heat map showing you how people move around a larger space. So where are people congregating? Are they using the delineated paths and way markings, or are they finding their own way around different places and spaces? This again is just a bit more information around the trend monitoring tool. So you can see here the heat map, and then on the bottom right, the graphs in the dashboard. And again, maybe we'll look at one or two examples from people around the room today. We'll bring it to life a little bit. And here I noticed, John, somebody in the room was it you, Madeline, was from Sheringham? Somebody was from Sheringham. And you can see here, actually, Sheringham is visible in this graph. So this is illustrating the activity. You can see, obviously, the road infrastructure, but also the Norfolk Coast Path, which is a major walking route and attracts tourists from all over the country. And we can measure the use of that route, any subsection of it, anywhere that we want at any time, and pull that data through to a dashboard. And here is just an example of the monthly movement report, just showing us how we can automate that process to enable us just to get the latest information when we need it. In terms of the detailed reports, again, a little bit more detail on what you get there. So any size or space, in the monitor, you can see that the park there, which actually is in North London, if anyone's from the Enfield area, this is a park called Forty Hall, which is a country park, and you can see the polygon, the shape that there is in a regular shape that we literally drew around the perimeter of the space in order to generate that report. And all of the outputs that you can see listed in the bullet points are included in there. The reason that this authority wanted the data was to understand how many of the visitors came from the local area, from a walking distance away, and how many came from further afield, because they were interested in the politically sensitive opportunity to impose car park charging in this space, because their priority was to provide access to local residents, particularly those from a walking distance away. And as they found that more than 50% of their visitors came from outside of the local authority boundary, it provided them with some robust evidence to be able to put car park charging in place, because it wasn't the role, the authority's perspective was it wasn't their role to subsidise access to their infrastructure for non-residents. So some of the things that the data does, it turns anecdote into objective evidence and supports objective decision making. So if any of you are involved in neighbourhood planning, for example, or the development, the protection, the rationalisation, or the development of any infrastructure in your places, and you don't have any data on how many people use an existing space, or you want to make the case for increased investment into a place or area based on its popularity, then generating a report to provide some of that evidence can be really powerful in terms of supporting decision making, or additionally unlocking access to investment. So a number of our customers use this data for grant applications, particularly capital grants to organisations like the Heritage Lottery Fund, because it's providing that objective evidence base to support those things. What you can see here, based on the data that we pull from the origin location, is we combine it with census data and also Experian Mosaic profile segmentation data to provide this additional report, which gives you insights about the kind of people who are visiting a place or space. So we can show you the visitors by indices of multiple deprivation, so to show you the kind of socioeconomic profile of your visitors to the place of interest, the age profile of visitors, the likelihood of them having a disability, the likelihood of them being born overseas, and the distribution of visitors by distance traveled. So again, a range of useful outputs, particularly for grant applications or to prove the impact of your work, to be able to shout about the difference that your investment and the work of your parish or town council is making on those communities, or to learn about where you need to do better to help to understand and identify areas for improvement, where visitors aren't coming from, and then what work you might need to do to connect with those communities to encourage them to benefit from your places and spaces. I've just dropped this in here because I thought it may be of interest. So one of the things that we're also able to do, and this is an example in the US, is more detailed analysis on specific days. So if any of you are involved in events, for example, so you host any events, you put on any events, or you enable or facilitate any events in your area, we can provide more detailed analysis on the days that those events take place. So if those dates are identified, we can tell you about the number of visitors to that location on that specific day in more detail. And in fact, the origin location where those visitors came from. So are your visitors to the, I don't know, May Day event coming from the parish, or is it attracting people from neighbouring parishes? So what is the impact of your event? And then using that to attract commercial investment, sponsorship, for example, from local businesses or others, or even just being able to quantify or justify the investment that your town or parish councils are making into these events. Just for kind of transparency and clarity, we're offering, I wanted to be clear on the costs associated with this and aware that this is not a cheap investment for organizations of the scale of many of those that are around the virtual table today. We have provided a special offer for Scribe customers, including a 20% discount. And in fact, the annual subscription to the general trend monitoring tool, the 100 meter by 100 meter square, where you're able to do unlimited analyses of as many places or spaces as you want, we've actually, as well as halving the cost of the annual subscription, we've put an additional 20% discount on top of the 50% discount that we'd already imposed on this. So you can get a year's subscription to that service for just £319. We aren't able to reduce the cost of the detailed reports more significantly, other than the 20% discount that we're providing here, because of the amount of work and data processing required. So our margin in terms of this work isn't significant. So I wish I could make this more accessible at this particular time, and I'm aware that this isn't a cheap service. But it may be something, I don't know if you have neighbouring parishes that you might be able to work together on. We'd be happy to look at combined offers for neighbouring parishes to unlock some of the scales of economy, because as you can see here, the work required from us, it's less expensive for us to do multiple sites in one area. So it starts off quite expensive, but then gets incrementally, much cheaper. For example, Birmingham Council are one of our customers, and we're mapping 591 green spaces across the city of Birmingham for that £20,000. So you can see the real value and that comes through scale, but conscious that many of the organizations here today won't have a need for 500 green spaces as your smaller organizations, but it may be something that you can do in collaboration, or it may just be useful in terms of the justification for the monitoring or implementation of any grant or capital infrastructure investments, or linked to infrastructure planning, particularly neighbourhood plans, supporting providing that evidence base for decision making. I've been involved in quite a lot of open space strategies in the past, and built facility strategies, and in my experience, there's a real limitation in terms of the methodology, which is around, there's a lot of consultation and engagement with, sports clubs, community groups, and the like, but very little by the way of evidence of usage, particularly objective, independent evidence of usage, and in particularly of informal spaces where there's no data collected. So this really can plug that gap to enable you to unlock SIL investment or Section 106 investment, depending on your particular investment structure locally, but aware that it's not a cheap service from that perspective. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to switch tabs, and I'm just in terms of who I can see. Has it switched tabs? Amanda Eastwood, I can see you. Can you nod for me? Yeah, great, thank you. So I'm just going to show you how this works. I'm just going to log in to an account here. So when you log into the platform, just going to very whistle-stop tour show you we've got an interactive map, and you can search for place or space. So I know that we've got someone from Sheringham here, so I'll just take us into Sheringham, and we can see lots of different bits of information here in relation to sharing, and we can switch to satellite view to see that we've got different boundaries in here. So here's lower super output area boundaries. Here are electoral ward boundaries with labels. So you can oh, I put the wrong labels in, sorry. So you can basically use this visualization in this pane here to take kind of screen grabs by clicking this button, export map. So if you need to drop these into any grant applications, any reports, any presentations, you can layer up the data in this window and then get a nice image of it to use for whatever it is that you want to use. We've got lots of community information. So if you want to know about the demography or the profile of communities, different places, you can visualize that through the heat map or through the map as well. So for example, female population age 60 to 74 at lower super output area level. So you can see that there, or we can have deprivation index. So the level of deprivation at lower super output area level or at ward level. You can visualize that in the platform as you need to. And if you want to know more about a particular area, you can click on it and it will tell you about the population, how many people live there, how that's distributed by deprivation, by health status, by languages spoken, and the like. So lots of useful contextual information. But then if we want to look at the movement of people, I'm just going to turn on the heat map. So turn on the heat map, we're looking at December 2024, so last month, and we'll switch to the weekends, and we'll start off at 6 in the morning. We'll turn up the sensitivity. So obviously not a lot going on at 6 in the morning in Sheringham, you'll be pleased to know. But as we go through the day, you'll see that it starts to, and the road into Cromer there on the east will start to light up, and then you see people move in. You can see along the promenade there and by the golf course at the north of the area. I'll just zoom in a little bit. You can see how that changes over time. But if we want to know about how people move in or are using a particular place or space, I've got an example here in Norwich just to show you. So Eaton Park is a fairly large park in urban area of Norwich. And what I've done here is just built a collection of these squares. So if I just switch to satellite view, you'll see these squares. So this is the park. And I've just clicked on the squares that I'm interested in to build this collection. So I'm asking the platform to tell me about the movement of people in this place. And then I save that information, and I can then go through to our dashboards. go through to our dashboard, find the place of interest, Eaton Park, click only this. And then here is the relative use of that park starting in January 2022 every month for the last 3 years. And we can say, well, actually, what's it like comparison year on year? So 2022 compared with 2023 compared with 2024. And here is the usage of that place by hour of the day. So you can see here, massive spike at 9 a.m. Can anyone hazard a guess as to why there's a huge spike at 9 a.m. in comparison to every other time?
Park run.
Correct, park run. So if I switch and I go to just show me the weekday data instead, when obviously there's no park run, you get a different usage profile. So it's still busy first thing in the morning, but it's also busy around 6 o'clock. So from that, we can infer usage. So it's probably the people using it for utilitarian purposes, so walking through it on the way to or from school or work, or it's dog walkers, or it's leisure users, people going to the parks, etc. So you get lots of insights from that, and you can download these graphs and use them as you want to and drop them into any reports or presentations as you need. But when we come on to the detailed reports, I'll just show you an example of the detailed reports that we can generate. I'll show you. So here is a park example. Here's a couple of parks in Derbyshire. If we've got anyone from Derbyshire, big up Derbyshire. These are country parks. One is called Shipley Country Park, so we'll just look at that. And you can see here we've drawn the shape to match the perimeter of the space. So this enables us to look at the bits, only the bits we're interested in, stay away from the roads and make sure that the data is correct. This is a 1-year report, and we can look at the whole year or any dates within it by selecting the start and end date that we want to know about. Here's some summary data, the amount of visits, the average time spent, the distance traveled. And here for those 365 days are the daily visits. And you can download this data into Excel format, so you can use it as you need to. The second page shows you that data broken down by hour of the day, by days of the week, weekdays versus weekends. Here is the dwell time that I mentioned. So the number and distribution of visitors by the amount of time that they spent in that space. The third graph is quite useful to understand how people use the space. So this is going to show us a heat map of tracking the individual devices within that space. So from a high level, it's all going to look quite red because it's going to show you everybody kind of combined. But when we zoom in, you'll be able to see the kind of differentiated movement patterns of people within this space. So it shows us the paths that people are using. It shows us where, in some instances, it might be places where you don't want people, for example, areas of special scientific interest. And this will enable you to monitor whether people have moved or used those different places. And, as you go more granular, you can see how people move around, the paths that they use, the areas that they're frequenting. So if you've got play areas, if you've got skate parks, then these kind of things would glow up and show whether they're heavily used or heavily frequented. Based on the mobile data. And then the last page is the visitors. It takes a little bit of time to load because there's a huge amount of data involved in this particular output. But on the left, what you're going to see is a map of the home location of visitors. So we track those devices, those 20 million devices, and we track them for 6 months prior to the report. And we track the overnight location of those devices to infer the home location of those people. And then on the right is a table by descending frequency. These are the output areas, so similar to a postcode. So where people have come from and the distance that they are from the place. And then as we zoom in, I think this is, as we zoom in, you can see the red area is the park itself. And then the darker the green, the more frequent the visitors to that country park. So you can see the distribution of visitors. So this, for example, is the economic impact and the tourism effect of a significant place or space, where it pulls from, and then how different local businesses or communities can connect and capitalize on that. So are you connecting with people from the deprived communities? Are you only pulling people into your places and spaces from the leafy suburbs? Excuse me. So this kind of insight can give you that information, and you can download, as I said, the raw data from that. So I'm very conscious. I've thrown a lot of information at you there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to take any questions, any comments, any observations from anyone in the room.
Ben, I don't know, I've got a quick question. I don't know if you're able to pull up a report on demand, but yeah, we had a new skate park installed in North Walsham in February 2022. It'd be really, I don't know, how's that impact the community? Has the usage increased? Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, oh yeah,
So we may well be able to do that. For one thing that I didn't mention is for the detailed reports, they actually take quite a bit of time to process and
yeah, I've
return.
seen that. Yeah, yeah.
So there's actually a 4 to 5 week turnaround on the detailed reports, but we can look at the relative use of the depending on how the squares
I think the
fall.
squares should land, yeah, on the ball.
Okay, so if I share again,
This is like a classic use case. Are you delivering community value? That skate park, I think, cost 150K. I wonder how it's, and it'll also be, I guess you won't be able to tell us, but because I think it's the best skate park now in Norfolk. So I wonder how many people it's attracting outside North Walsham.
yeah, so we won't be able to, from this report, we won't be able to say the origin location. We'll just be able to look at the relative usage of it based on the trends. But if you can guide me
Yeah, it's
to,
near the,
and let me switch to satellite so it's easier for you.
yeah. Yeah, just zoom in. It's near the junction. There you can see it on the no to the see the to the southwest. There's a yeah, that building. Then up a
That's the
bit.
leisure centre, right?
Yeah, then next door there it is.
So it's here.
That's it. Yeah, I think it's still being developed then. But yeah, that's the spot of the new skate park.
So we've got a bit of road noise there, but let's see what it's oh, I just clicked the wrong button.
And while we're having a look at this, feel free to raise your hand if you have some questions, and then I'll call you up to ask them. And yeah, ideally unmute yourself or and put your video on when that's. Actually, we can ask questions. Probably Ben can answer questions while he's having a play. Oh, is this it here already?
Yeah, so there you go. That's 2022 compared with 2023 compared with
What colors?
2024.
What color are the
So
lines?
red is
Oh yeah.
2024. So from the summer onwards, it's the highest usage, the highest activity in comparison to previous years. So you can see when was it in April, May time, 2022?
February 2022, I think it was.
Yeah, so it kind of picks up from there was movement. I mean, maybe that was people in and around doing the building work and stuff. And then from that
Yeah, it
point,
could
it
have
then
been. Yeah,
picks
yeah.
up and you can see, yeah, it looks consistently fairly well used as a site and time of day, busy mid-morning. And then on the weekends,
Well, it could be a lot of it's picking up the traffic as
yeah,
well.
so it
Yeah,
might be the way that the squares fall in that particular example.
yeah, yeah, because mid-morning
Um,
is commuter, isn't it? But
yeah,
anyway, cool. Right. Let's give a nice wave. And thanks to Ben. Take it easy. Have a good day.
nice to meet you all.
Cheers all. Bye-bye.